What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I can't believe it, but the NHL season is less than a month away, and that means we got to start talking about some of the teams and players that you need to keep a close eye on as we enter the year. So today I'm going to be talking about the most underrated superstars and why these players need more recognition as we enter the upcoming season. But before we get into today's video, if you guys have been enjoying the content lately, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe now. Really helps support the channel and gets these videos out to more guys like you. So with all of that being said, let's get right into today's video. Now, before I get into my actual selections, I just want to toss out a few honorable mentions. Of course, if you guys want better in-depth reasoning, I could make a part 2, so drop your thoughts in the comments if you do want to see that. But for this video, these are my honorable mentions. I have Alexei Protas, Lucas Raymond, Matthew Shane, Jared McCann, Jesper Bratt, Mason Marchment, Kyle Connor, Eriksson Ek, and Kirill Marchenko. All guys who deserve a bit more love, but the guys I have on my list are just a tier above them. So with that being said, let's get into my first selection for this list. Alright, so to kick things off, I'm making this video because of a previous upload, and that was one where I talked about the Montreal Canadiens, their upcoming season, and how I think that they're going to really excel this year. And most of the comments were talking about one player just still being so underrated, and that's Nick Suzuki. While I agree with Habs fans or anyone who commented on that video that Suzuki is underrated, I also have to admit that things have definitely changed since the Four Nations break last year, with him putting up over 90 points and getting Montreal back into the postseason. I feel over the years Nick Suzuki has been considered underrated because he's more of that quiet, skillful player who has a strong all-around game, who's a good leader, and all of that stuff. He's not the most flashy or sparky guy, and often his production was just overshadowed by the Montreal Canadiens' struggles. It usually happens like that. If you're not on a contending team, maybe people don't recognize your talents as much. We see it all the time. I think that being in a high-profile market, though, and finally getting the Canadiens back on the map, we're going to see people stop underestimating his talent and impact, because if he can keep up a consistent production and Montreal stays a competitive team, then there's no reason why we shouldn't be talking about Suzuki. Like I said, I do understand why people feel Nick Suzuki is still underrated. Defensively, I think this guy's a stud, and point production-wise, we saw what he could get to at his best. And he's still young and has time to grow from that 90-point season. So, yeah, I believe Nick Suzuki is still an underrated player. I think he deserves a nod on this list, which is why we're including him. But I do feel like of all the players on this list, that he's the one that's changing the most, and a lot more people have been recognizing him for his skill as of late. This next player, maybe it's a bit overplayed. For a while, I felt like everybody thought that Alexander Barkov was underrated, but the more and more everybody said he was underrated, the more and more we were all talking about him, if that makes sense. And at this point, I feel like Sebastian Aho is falling into that same category. Centering Carolina's top line, Aho has been their offensive driver since he basically came into the league. But what really makes him special is his versatility. Aho can quite literally be good at everything. Power play, penalty kill, face-offs, defense, forechecking, back-checking, skating. You name it, and the kid can do it. Aho is also one of the game's top two-way players. And when we often talk about Carolina, for example when they acquired Mikkorantanen, not everyone fits in their system because they play a specific brand of hockey that's more hard-nosed and based on defense. So to get a high-quality offensive player who can play a strong 200-foot game that fits their system well isn't the most easy thing to do. But in my eyes, Sebastian Aho has had the most success in Carolina's system, and for some reason, because he's not that 100-point guy or playing in a big market, we often just overlook him as a player. Either way, I think that Aho is so talented and often deserves to be in top 10 center conversations more than he often is. Since his breakout during the 2021-22 season, Adrian Kempe has slowly established himself as a top star in the NHL. But even with his strong, consistent production, he often just flies under the radar by most hockey fans. Kemps has now put together back-to-back 70-point campaigns and is honestly one of the most well-rounded players in the league. He's got excellent hands, a natural scoring instinct. He's often not talked about enough with his two-way game. His shot is dead on, he moves well, and he thrives in front of the net. Through his career, he has a 35-goal season and a 41-goal season, but almost never gets any of the spotlight. And honestly, I wouldn't put it past him if one year he had 50 goals and we still didn't mention him with some of the best players in the game. My personal favorite thing about Adrian Kempe is his water bug effect. The guy plays with so much effort, and every time he gets off the bench, my eyes are just drawn to him because he impacts winning. Now, I don't think that he's been the biggest reason for the Kings' struggles in the playoffs. I think that that's more about the Edmontonoilers than the LA Kings in general, but Adrian Kempe, in every postseason, I still see him as a noticeable X factor and a guy who continues to impact this team and how they play. So Adrian Kempe is a guy who I want everyone to start paying more attention to. If you don't like LA hockey, this is the kind of guy who will change your opinion on that. He's just so fun to watch, and the guy is arguably one of the best snipers in the game. Seriously, his shot is wicked. There were so many fans who felt shocked when the Four Nations rosters were announced and Brandon Hagel was on Team Canada, but to me, it was nuts that people reacted that way. Now, was there maybe some bias with Coop being head coach and all? Maybe. But let's not act like Brandon Hagel isn't a hell of a player. Hague's put up a monster 90-point season with 35 goals playing on line 2 for the Lightning. The kid is a buzzsaw who plays with an insane amount of hustle every game, and that reminds me a lot of like an Adrian Kempe type, the water bug who you just instantly see whenever he's on the ice. Maybe the underrated factor for this player comes from everyone not liking the Lightning for so long and not wanting to see them get any more good players. Or perhaps it comes from him playing behind the line that's so talented with Kucherov, Gensel, and Point. But either way, if you tossed him alongside Kucherov or even Point, I think this guy would go off and have over a 100-point season and even get some MVP considerations. The last thing I want to add is that a large percentage of his points have come during 5v5 play, which makes him a very, very important piece to this Tampa offense. He quite literally is a dog, and I would be shocked if he's not on Team Canada for the Olympics this year. And as one last side note, we have to look back at the Blackhawks and ask the question of why they gave him up for so little, because it really is a shame that we're not seeing him paired alongside Connorbedard right now. Those two would be so fun to watch together. Speaking of bad decisions from the Chicago Blackhawks, let's look at another one. Remember when Dylan Strome wasn't given an offer to stay in Chicago? Because I do. As a former third overall pick behind the likes of McDavid and Eichel, Strome did have high expectations coming into the league, and to be fair, the start of his career wasn't exactly stellar. He, like many players, didn't exactly excel in Arizona. When he was moved to Chicago, they didn't have a clear direction, and he was injured a lot, so he put up a few solid seasons, but not enough for the Blackhawks to feel he was worth investing in. Ultimately, though, he ended up in Washington, which I feel is the best place for him because he's truly found his game there. Since joining the Caps, he has put together 3 consecutive 65-plus point seasons, with the last one being his best, totaling 82 points for his first point-per-game season of his career. Strome is being called the new Nicholas Backstrom for his playmaking abilities and was a big part of the Capitals' success last season. Maybe this one's a little bit premature. Maybe some people are talking about Stromer, but I feel like a lot of the times the Capitals, even myself at times, are overlooked because maybe they're not the most flashy team, or maybe Strome isn't that kind of player you associate with other stars in the league. But I'm putting my foot down. I think Dylan Strome is a star. I'm expecting a big year from him, and after a point-per-game season and helping the Capitals be so successful last year, I don't see any reason why he won't replicate that or even get better. So keep an eye on Stromer this year. This is a guy who's incredibly skilled and is a player you're going to want to watch if you're a fan of the Capitals, or maybe you want to tune into a few of their games. Now this next one, I really like this player, and he might not be the most flashy guy in the league, but I think a lot of opponents feel differently, and that's Robert Thomas. Thomas has taken a big step forward the past 2 seasons, becoming more than a point-per-game player, and more importantly, an incredible passer and two-way player. Since the 2021-22 season, he leads all skaters in 5-on-5 high-danger passes per 60 minutes. And he ranks among top forwards with primary assists during that stretch, which is an important statistic. At 6 foot, 218 pounds, Thomas does a great job of protecting the puck and making smart plays. He quite literally is the ideal top-line center that every team wants, because his 200-foot game along with his offense really separates him from a lot of other players in the league. Maybe it's because he isn't the most flashy player, or again, we got to bring up markets. I think that that's important when we're talking about stars, and St. Louis, they might not be the biggest market, but they know when a guy can play. Thomas deserves more credit, especially after helping the Blues with a near impossible playoff push last season, and likely will be considered when talking about the Olympics in 2026. But until then, I want you all to be talking about Robert Thomas, because this guy, he's a stud. Hands down though, without a doubt, to me, Clayton Keller has become the most underrated player in the NHL. Keller is the current youngest captain in the league. He just put up a career-high 90-point season and even helped lead the United States to a gold medal for the first time in 93 years at World Championships. Maybe it's the market. I've talked about that a lot today because I do feel like it's important with superstars. If you're not in an original six market or another really popular area, people often just overlook you. It also could be the fact that people consider him to be undersized, and that's a trait that a lot of people are worried about, but Keller continues to defy that, so that's not really a good excuse. And maybe it's just because he hasn't been put in the best situation, something that has been changing over recent years, but earlier on in his career, it's not exactly like Arizona had the best rosters out there for him to be a part of. With Utah being a healthy place to play and the team acquiring the best talent that Keller has played with in his career, I expect him to break out even more this season and get the nod for the US Olympic team. So if you are not watching Mammoth Hockey yet, this is your sign. Keller is a beast and deserves a lot more recognition, and at this point, I feel like he's the most underrated player in the NHL. But this is my list. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If there's a player I left off who you feel deserves a bit more recognition, leave their name for me. And if you want to see a part 2, comment that as well. Again, thank you guys so much for watching these videos. If you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up and subscribe now. I also have a few other pieces of content for you to check out as we finish out the off season. And again, thank you guys for supporting the channel. I will see you in the next upload.